Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today on December 1st, 2020 for World AIDS Day. I'm Alan Locher. I wanted to do a show to honor this day and have a conversation about the state of HIV and AIDS in America today. I'm hoping that conversations like this will help to educate and take the stigma that still exists of HIV and AIDS. For those of you who don't know, World AIDS Day was first celebrated on December 1st, 1988. It remains important today because it reminds you, the public, and our governments around the world that HIV has not gone away. There is still a much vital need to raise money, increase awareness, fight prejudice, and improve education. Let me share some important facts from HIV.gov. HIV can affect anyone regardless of sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, gender, age, or where they live. There are approximately 1.2 million people in the US currently living with HIV today. About 14% of them, 1 in 7, don't know it and need testing. Globally, there are about 38 million people who have the virus. Despite the virus only being identified in 1984, more than 35 million people have died of HIV or AIDS, making it one of the most destructive pandemics in world history. Annual infections in the US have been reduced by more than 2/3 since the height of the epidemic in the mid-1980s. And however, the Centers for Disease Control data indicate that the progress has stalled in recent years at about 38,000 new HIV infections each year between 2014 and 2018. HIV continues to have a disproportionate impact on certain populations, particularly racial and ethnic minorities and gay and bisexual men. The latest estimate indicates that effective HIV prevention and treatment are not adequately reaching those who could most benefit from them. And certain groups, such as men who have sex with men, transgender persons, African Americans, and Hispanics and Latinos, continue to be disproportionately affected. Additionally, the highest rates of new HIV infection in our country continue to occur in the South. Today is Giving Tuesday, and there is a link to the gay men's health crisis on this live show today. If you feel so inclined to donate, I would appreciate it. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have my first guest here today. On World AIDS Day back in 2009, and at age 28 years old, Tyler Helms bravely shared his HIV status with the world in a Facebook post. Tyler has continued to share life's ups and downs in a very personal and honest way ever since that very first blog post. He shares with purpose and says that the most important reason is he has wanted others to share their own story, because the more we share, the more we are seen. And the more we are seen, the more we realize that we aren't that different after all. As he wrote in that first blog post in 2009, the conversation we have today, tomorrow, or in years to come just might change someone else's future. I hope today's conversation does just that, and I encourage you to read Tyler's blog posts. Please welcome to the Locher Room, my friend, Tyler Helms. I know that was a lot to say.
But, I got like teary-eyed.
Oh, don't. Well, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me. I think you know from the very first time you shared your post. I mean, to me, you know, I am not living through what you were living through. I lived through it as a gay man, but I just think it is a brave thing to do. And I agree with you. In all walks of life, conversations help educate and teach us. And
Agreed.
So looking back on, sharing that, 11 years ago, what prompted your decision, and specifically, on World AIDS Day?
It's funny. I've been thinking about that ever since. I don't know. There's been moments where I've not regretted it, but second guessed it, because I came out pretty publicly, and then I decided to do it with every aspect of my life, and I've continued to do that. And I think at the time it was less about honestly other people, and it was more about I was literally dying inside. I had not told anyone. I told like 5 people in my life at the time, and I was living with this secret day after day, and it was weighing on me to the point that I was having trouble functioning. I was depressed. I started to use drugs. It was really, really rough. And so it was over Thanksgiving. I was in Key West, and I went jogging near they have an AIDS memorial there by the beach. And I thought, why am I not talking about this? Like, why am I not saying something? And honestly, I just wanted to tell a few people and make it and call it a day. And then
You
I
kind
happened
of
to
did
post,
that.
I posted on Facebook and the Advocate ran it, and it just kind of took off. And I think I can't understate the impact it had on my life, how it changed my complete worldview, and it saved me. It really did. And I apologize in advance. I moved today, and that's my cleaning lady in the back.
You just said it changed your worldview. How so?
You know, I thought I knew what people were going through. I thought I had a good understanding and compassion and empathy about the world around me. And what happened on that day was not necessarily people reaching out about me and my status, but I got loads of stories back. People would share really, really intimate details about their life or things they were struggling with or challenges. Everyone that emailed me had that connection to HIV or AIDS. And it really it rounded out my view of the world. When you have people share that much about themselves and what they're going through, you really do start to see we're kind of all the same. We're going through all the same things. And it also changed my worldview of HIV and AIDS, because I didn't think I was the only one, obviously, but I thought there wasn't that many, and people were definitely telling other people and being honest about it. And that wasn't the case. It was still so stigmatized. People had faced real challenges after being diagnosed, legal challenges, very, very real stigma-based discrimination. And that shocked me. It just changed everything. It really opened my eyes to a world that I hadn't been looking at before.
What were some of the most, you just said things that surprised you, the preconceived things that you thought but weren't in actuality? Do you remember what those are?
You know, first of all, I had a lot of people that I knew come out and tell me they had HIV. And I was like, wait, you never mentioned that. No one ever told me. And I'd literally been like fighting to find someone that had it that I knew. And there were people that reached out and did that. And that was one thing. I think I was surprised by people's education and naivete that didn't exist. I thought I was never gonna date again, honestly. I thought I wasn't gonna have sex again. It was this like muddled thing in my body and my soul. And when I started to hear from other people, it changed my perception. Other people were not as challenged by it. Other people had come to terms with it. My best friend Felipe at the time said, I've dated several people with HIV, and I'd just never known that. We'd never really talked about it. And that was another impetus for this. Gay men weren't talking about it still. It was almost like something we just knew was there. It was existent. We kind of knew that person that had it, but we never talked about it in a real substantive way.
And do you think this stigma, I know it still exists for many people. People have a hard time talking about life in general.
Yeah.
But what do you think's changed the most about, sort of what you felt in 2009 and what you feel in 2020?
Gosh, I was actually writing about that today. I don't know. My view on it now is so different, and I wouldn't say that it's complete comfortableness and acceptance, and I'm happy about it. But thinking back at that time and how she just flushed the toilet. I'm really sorry. I was looking at it. I was so sad and so scared, and so I was not in a good place. And now I have a better understanding of the disease. I have a much different relationship to it. And truthfully, the more I've talked about it and the more it became something that I really fought for, to fight stigma and to fight discrimination, I feel like I have skin in the game. And so I can't underestimate how much it changed me. I'm a different person with it today. I will say it's a different disease today. Even 13 years ago, with the introduction of PrEP changed the world. It's made the conversations before and after having sex much easier. It's made people less scared. There were a lot of people that didn't want to have sex with someone that had HIV or date someone that had HIV. They just didn't know like what would happen. And so now with, the science is there. What's shocking to me is that so many people still don't subscribe to it.
Well, science, yeah, I mean, it's surrounding us today in every walk of life, but it's education. I mean, it is having these conversations, how somebody learns, that there is PrEP available,
That's right.
There are,
outside of cities like New York or LA, because
right.
In Atlanta, it's not as known.
Well, and like I just said, the largest population I think being affected are those in the South,
Yeah.
So they're definitely
because no one talks about sex. No one talks about sex.
which, you know,
It's crazy.
right. So the Facebook post went up, and then the Advocate ran it, and then they approached you to write was it a weekly, the column,
Yeah,
the
it
questions?
was a weekly. I couldn't keep up with weeklies. I did a bi-weekly. The editor at the time was an old friend of mine, and he actually emailed me on World Days Day and said, "I'm just going to run your post." He kind of asked, but not really. And I said, "Whatever you want to do." And I got thousands of emails within like hours of after that. And so I had already kind of made a commitment that I would, I didn't know how I was going to keep it going. By the way, I was so uninformed. I just went out there and just started sharing about my life and didn't really have an understanding of what that meant and that people would be asking me advice. And so I really stuck to, I only share my experience. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a advocate per se. I just share what's going on in my life. And they called me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to write about your life? You can write about anything you want." And I thought, okay. So I focused it around HIV and AIDS. And to this day, I'm really proud of those pieces. And I felt like I stayed true to myself and being completely honest. I said I'm going to be honest about what's going on, and I tried not to sugarcoat things or beat around the bush or lie. I was really writing and then stripping away the ego from it, and so it was really real stuff. And the response, I still get responses to this day. When people come up to me, and I'm not that great, I'm just saying, but people will come up to me and say, "Your column got me through it." Or one time I posted, I regretted sharing about my HIV status, and 2 people emailed me and said, "Never regretted it, saved my life." And that's just big. That's monumental stuff.
I mean, it is. It is those conversations. Somebody just wrote to us that the biggest problem with successfully fighting stigma is the failure to get the word out that HIV is no longer a death sentence.
That's right.
Which,
That's right.
Which is crazy to think that people are not educated enough to know that at this stage in 2020.
I know.
It's a completely different world. Any regrets about sharing?
P.S. I specifically asked them not to do this during this time, but whatever.
Wait, what?
I specifically asked the clean people not to do it. I just want everyone to know, like, I planned. This whole thing was going to be really like without that.
Well, what happens when you work in your home.
That's
today,
right. That's right. Regrets. There are moments where I don't regret it in full sweeping scale, but there are moments that I wish people just didn't know so much about me. At work, I've been to rehab 3 times. I've really struggled with some other areas of life, and I've really been successful in other areas of life. So having to figure that out and then deciding to do it with telling the world about it, I don't know, maybe that was a good decision. It panned out okay, but there's been moments where I thought, I need to scale back, or I've kind of taken a break from even posting anything because it just gets to be a lot. It's heavy stuff. So the regrets are that I wasn't really ready to do that. I don't think I was well informed or knew what that meant. But all in all, I would do it again, I think.
Well, and knowing that you definitely helped people. I mean, you must have helped, also because a year later you wrote, that post asking, would you date someone who is HIV? Can you talk about that and what you learned at that time, the responses you got to that?
You know why I wrote it? Because I don't know that I would have. I don't know if I wasn't HIV positive, if I would have dated someone that had HIV until I got it. In fact, I'm pretty sure, and I would have never told anyone that in that way because I wasn't mean-spirited.
I don't think many people would, but I think part of people that being an automatic response is not fully thinking things through, understanding that you can have safe sex, all those
right. I've been really, I don't want to say lucky because I don't think it's luck. I think that you meet the right people in your life, and truthfully, it becomes a litmus test. I have gotten what I hope to post later today if the cleaning lady will get out here. I wrote about how when you share with someone right before you're about to be intimate or in a dating environment, and the rejection you get can be jarring. I've gotten far more acceptance, and I've had really beautiful long-term relationships, but it's those ones that people reject that you remember the most. And those are tough. It's hard you go back to this place of like, is there something wrong with me? Why did I do this? And you really beat yourself up over it, and it can take you to an unhealthy place. And so that's always my thing with dating is that I don't want to date right now because I just can't imagine having all that stuff go on. But it's been pretty nothing what I thought it was going to be. I've had relationships again, and they didn't end because of HIV. They ended because of loads of other things.
What would you say to somebody who might, come to you and say, I have the opportunity to date somebody, what would your answer be? How would you answer that?
People
If
have
somebody
come
was
to me and they've said, what do? I don't know. I'm like, calm down, A. And B, it's just talk to your doctor. Now, if you're on PrEP, it's great. It's funny because before PrEP, people would ask, should I date someone with HIV? I want to have unprotected sex with them. I'm not sure how that works. And at the time, there was science around if you're undetectable, you won't transmit. And most people that are treated regularly are undetectable. But people just don't believe that. So I was always like, you got to make the best decision for yourself. And it was a challenge for some people that dated me. They've said that that was a challenge for them. And I don't necessarily know what was going on in their mind that made it as big of a challenge, or what was challenging about it. Or maybe I was just challenging as a person. But I get it. And so I always try to remember I get both sides of it.
It's so interesting talking about this today. Like we're living a pandemic right now, and people not listening to science or doctors, but it's so true. Talk to your doctor, talk to somebody you trust to get the information, because it is misinformation that I think scares all of us most.
And also, would you want to date yourself if you ended up getting it? Like, would you want someone to date you? Think about it.
Right. Yeah, I love that you were thinking about that. You just said that earlier. You were thinking about that. What do you think most about when you started the conversation back on World AIDS Day in 2009? What did you have any idea of what you wanted people to take away from that? And now you still share, and you still share so bravely, so honestly, on so many subjects that I think, even if you're helping one person, it's a really great deal.
I mean, my life's been a complete mess, so I got to use it somehow. No, I'm kidding.
But you have. Well, I mean, you are making a joke about that, but you have, and I think that's important for other people. And I again recommend people go read, your honest blog, because it is so true that you might call it a mess, but it's the thing that we are all walking through called life. We all make mistakes. And if you can learn from it.
I don't know what I really wanted at the time. I think I did say this. I would continue sharing as long as each time I did, I got a meaningful response, just one. Because I think if you get one response back, and no joke, some days I've gotten one response. And so I keep sharing. And I really enjoy the moments of peace that I found in the struggles of my life, or when I see someone else like me, or when I hear another story like mine, or when I know I'm not alone, but when you actually hear someone going through it, there's just some relief in that. And so to be able to provide that, I think, is a powerful thing. And listen, I think we are literally only here for this one life, at least according to my beliefs. And I think that if you're not going to be honest with yourself and share about what you're going through and who you are and what you've struggled with and what you've triumphed at, then what's the point? Like, what's the point? And I get that there's moments of privacy, but you have to be careful that privacy doesn't turn into secrecy, because secrecy can make you sick.
That's a great point. How did you get involved with GMHC initially?
AIDS Walk. So I did AIDS Walk the first year after you participated.
Impact Red.
That's right. Yeah. And we raised a lot of money. Like, I was shocked at how much money we raised. Like, the second year we raised like over $100,000. And so they reached out to me
for your team, correct? Because I know
it was crazy.
Ray and I raised a lot, and part of your team. But yeah,
it was insane. I'm still so proud of those few years because we raised so much money, and I think we got a lot of people familiar with it. And they reached out to me, and I interviewed for the board, and they asked me on. And then I realized in probably my third term, it was a full-time job. And so I took a break from it, and then they recently reached out again. And so I agreed to rejoin. It's an interesting time right now. Most service organizations are faced with how do they provide service in the world of a pandemic. And so GMHC is not alone in that. So I'm excited to kind of see where they help them navigate the future.
Well, it must be some of what, we're doing here today, just being online.
Yeah.
Tyler,
you mentioned the stigma and the one thing I would hope people do, and GMHC has started to expand its psychiatric care. The first thing I ask everyone is, do you have a therapist? If they've been diagnosed and they don't have a therapist, I'm like, get a therapist. You just need it. You need someone to bounce stuff off of. And GMHC offers that now.
I think you need it in life.
Yeah, totally. I was so against it forever, and the minute I got one, I've had one for now like 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unbiased, person to share life. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me.
For doing this. I'm gonna bring out Krishna from GMHC in a minute, but thank you, Tyler. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. So my next guest, Krishna Stone, has been involved with the gay men's health crisis for 34 years. She first connected with the team in 1986 when she walked in the first annual AIDS Walk New York. She began volunteering with the group and joined the staff in 1993, and today she serves as a director of community relations in the communications department. Krishna was one of the heroes of AIDS activism, profiled in Victoria No's 2017 book, Fag Hags, Divas, and Moms, The Legacy of Straight Women in the AIDS Community. She has been honored for her work by Governor Andrew Cuomo and received a recognition from the city on World AIDS Day in 2014 for her outstanding dedication to combating the spread of HIV. The Gay Officers Action League, which brings LGBTQ law enforcement officers into the fight against AIDS, honored Krishna with the Sam Ciccone Community Service Award. Please welcome Krishna Stone. Hi, Krishna. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And as we say on World AIDS Day, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that stem from?
Oh, years ago. And I've forgotten who said it to me first, but it became like a greeting, of sorts. When people say, Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays on World AIDS Day, we say thank you for being here, and I think it also became because, we were losing so many people who were dying of AIDS in the early years. It really meant thank you for being here,
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I mean, you've been with them forever. Can you take us back and tell us how the gay men's health crisis started?
Sure. If folks Google June 5th, 1981, most likely there's a report that comes up from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And they had an article or, a report within the report in their morbidity and mortality report. And the article was written by physicians who were talking about their patients and who were all gay men who were presenting with rare infections and then ultimately dying very quickly. And so that was the first government report. And then July 3rd, 1981, there was an article by Lawrence Altman in the New York Times, and where he was asking, like, what is this? Is this a gay cancer? What's going on? And then, as with, most disasters, people gathered. And this time, about 70 gay men gathered in our co-founder, the late Larry Kramer's apartment. And on August 11th, 1981, and they passed around a hat, and that seed money helped to start what would become the first HIV and AIDS service organization in the world, and that was Gay Men's Health Crisis. And also in that room were our 6 founders. So in the early years, the programming was being developed, based on the needs of the people who were coming in the doors. And so at that time, we were helping people to die with dignity. And so that, people, the staff and volunteers, as the staff grew and as volunteers grew, to be of help as quickly as they could, because people were dying very quickly. And also the AIDS diagnosis was, at that time, for many, was a death sentence. So, it's interesting how we use the term urgent care now. And in that time, it was urgent care because people were dying. And so one of the signature services, the hotline. That was the first hotline in the country, the HIV and AIDS hotline, staffed by volunteers. And that still occurs to this day, of trained volunteers who are peer counselors. We also had the buddy program, which is still a part of our core services, where volunteers would go to our clients' homes or to visit them in the hospital, because often they were abandoned by family and friends, our clients, and left to die alone. And and the stigma, which is still plaguing communities, was great and powerful and dangerous, and HIV and AIDS related stigma still is very dangerous. So those are how the programs began. And then in the mid 90s, when when there were more medications that came through in the mid 90s, people began to live longer, and they wanted to go back to work. They wanted to address other issues in their lives. And so our services began to shift and change and grow, so that we were now helping people live with dignity. And that is still true today. Currently, we are providing services to nearly 10,000 people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS care services, such as legal assistance, meals programs, food pantry programs, mental health and substance use counseling, case management, a wide array of services. And we also have a testing center. We do prevention, education, programming, and public health policy work at all levels of government. And we are, as of mid-March, we have been working remotely, and we're able to figure out the ways to address, to see our clients, although we're seeing them on the phone and maybe through Zoom and through, the meetings with support
the digital
groups.
world.
The digital world, right. And so we increased wellness calls. We started to deliver bags of shelf-stable groceries and fresh produce to our clients. And so we remain committed. We could not close. There was just no way,
Right.
So we continue on.
It's crazy that we are in the middle of a pandemic, but thank God AIDS started in the 80s.
Right.
Thank God, today you are able to see them this way, because back then we would not be able to, you'd be talking to them only on the phone, but
right. And also trying to communicate by mail, which in many ways is a challenge, the mail. And also we can't at times trust that the mail will be, received or opened, which is sad to say could happen, but mail is still possibility yet. So for what we've heard from many of our clients is that they so appreciate the connection. We have not stopped reaching out to them. And so I think some of the issues that we're seeing right now is that an increase of isolation and loneliness, and heightened in ways that really impact the well-being and health of our clients. This is especially true for our older clients who are over the age of 50, who are living with HIV and who are long-term survivors. And so, imagine a long-term survivor who lost many, if not most of their friends back in the early years of the epidemic, and now they have to be quarantined, and then we have our immigrant clients who are afraid to go outside because they think that ICE is going to pick them up and take them to jail. Mm-hmm. And so there's an increase of barriers that block people living with HIV and AIDS from accessing care. And so we, my colleagues in particular who work directly with clients, have to help folks move through those barriers. The same with our HIV testing center. We've been able to do some external HIV testing, like at a faith community in the West Village, and then we can mail kits for testing that don't require blood being drawn, and then we're available by phone, and by email to communicate to people about HIV testing and testing for other sexually transmitted infections.
Somebody just asked, Scott just asked, how has your experience at GMHC impacted your own understanding of and the reaction to the arrival of COVID?
Well, it is, first of all, this is the first time as an employee that I've ever had to work remotely. It is awkward.
34 years.
Well, I started as a volunteer, and then in 86. Then I came on staff in 93. So I will say, as a staff person, in 27 years, long
time.
It is a long time, and it is awkward and frustrating. I realize that working remotely is a first world issue, but it's still hard. And so we have to find more creative ways of reaching out to each other as colleagues, as well as clients, the media. That's a lot of the work that I do in terms of working with the media. I think that what it's also brought to light, which is the issues around health inequities and racial injustices. It is not a surprise that Black and brown people, especially who are poor or who live at or below poverty level, do not at times receive the best of care. And so, it wasn't a surprise to us that there were high rates of COVID infection among Black and brown people, and that they were dying at, higher rates. And then you add on HIV and AIDS and other issues surrounding just being a New Yorker in this time, a very difficult time. So we have been working to raise awareness, continuing to work to raise awareness about the issues of racial injustices and health inequities. We're not working in silos with the folks with Black Lives Matters, Trans Lives Matters, gun control, LGBTQ rights, and rights for people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS. All of those issues intersect with each other, and the stigma that is still prevalent, placing people at higher risk of HIV or affecting the well-being of people living with HIV and AIDS is still very, very difficult. So much of our programming includes the ability to help people move through the shame and the traumas and the stigma, that connect to their lives.
Surrounding their lives and the illness. Where is GMHC now with, what are the critical issues for those living with and affected by, what are they continuing to face on a daily basis? And how can people who are watching help?
Well, some of the issues that I think are still really very, very challenging. Again, when you add on COVID-19, so you have an increase of need for mental health counseling, substance use counseling, food. We have clients who have food insecurities or, based on their history of lack of food at times, based on their lives. So food, connection to stable housing, and then just really wanting a community that they feel safe and that is non-judgmental. So and then you add on immigration, so we in terms of like helping our clients who are immigrants and who are undocumented and linking them to services. We have youth that we work with who are HIV negative and positive, and supporting them in dealing with all that they have to do as particularly LGBTQ youth of color, transgender women and men of color. This is where we still see, increases of HIV are in particular young.
They're the most at risk.
Still, even though, the reports are coming out that there's been some decline in some communities, in populations, yet we're still seeing that the most disproportionately impacted folks are young Black and Latinx, gay and bisexual men, and then Black and Latinx transgender women. And then of course there are other populations that are still impacted. We're looking at and bearing witness to the graying of the epidemic, meaning that, a huge proportion of our clients are over the age of 50. And that's across the city and across the country,
I think you said
people
it was
living with
like
HIV.
70%. I think you told me it was 70% about, right?
Yep. So, aging period has specific issues,
I hear you.
Yep, health, physical health, mental health, sexual health. People don't stop having sex just because they're in their 70s and 80s, and that there are very specific needs for our elder population. And then again, you add on the HIV and AIDS, you end on fear, the inability to talk about sex, because that's not what we do, as older people, and they grew up in that kind of culture, and other barriers. So
and then what's going on in the world,
I'm sorry.
today. Then you add what's going on in our world today with COVID.
Right. And then the damage that has been done by our federal government, we have to move through the healing process now that we're going into a new administration. So,
hopefully the immigration problem won't be as profound in 2021.
Right, which would be an enormous relief to many, many people across the country, who are here and are just trying to live a healthy life and are working and are trying to thrive, and so that they can move beyond the fears and the shame and everything else that keeps people, imprisoned, emotionally and psychologically.
Nicholas wanted to say thank you to you and Dr. Mary Gwynnin, who are true angels in the fight. Those of us old enough will never forget and will always be grateful for everything you've done. What are you most proud of for 27 years and 7 of those volunteering? What are you most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of is my ability to do service, to continue to be of service to others. My work at GMHC is, can be very hard and crazy making, but it's brilliant and it requires courage and creative thinking and a great sense of humor. Woo! But being of service, volunteering at other organizations, I'm really one of the proudest volunteer roles that I have had for this. We'll see. Next year will be 22 years. Is that I am a volunteer announcer along the LGBT Pride March, the New York City Pride March. And it just makes my heart sing every year to send out lots of unconditional love to millions of people, and I love it.
And isn't your daughter name? What's your daughter's name?
My daughter's name is Parade. Yes, and she is a parade. Yep, she really is. Well, she's a lovely human being. Yep.
What does she do?
Parade is she is a director. She's written short plays. She's written the book of a musical. She's directed performances.
Must be pretty proud of her mom.
She's very sweet. She was also a musical theater performer, so she gets the other side to productions and knows what that means to be a performer and what it means to be a director. And now that she directs, she gets it, and she still sings. But she's also very much connected to the social justice movements that are, that have arisen in her time as a young adult.
Oh, that's great. And there are too many of them.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Too many in her life. Before I let you go, if people want to volunteer, what are the volunteer opportunities?
Well, unfortunately, we are not able to
Right now.
offer volunteer opportunities at this time until the building reopens. But and hopefully that'll come next year soon, I hope. However, people can start to think about being a part of AIDS Walk New York, which happens in May, and either developing a team or walking with a friend or two. And that is our largest fundraiser. So it benefits AIDS Walk New York, benefits GMHC and several other HIV and AIDS service organizations in the tri-state area. People can donate, even before May. And the
Tyler and I
support.
were just talking about that because I asked Tyler how he got involved, and it was through
Right.
through the AIDS Walk, and I walked on his team back when he first started, on his Impact Red team. So we did that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's wonderful. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just really enjoy partnering, with folks, having discussions like this. I was part of a presentation for a company just beforehand, and just again having these meaningful dialogues and looking at the issues, the intersectionality of all these issues, and and keeping these conversations going. Sometimes they're not easy. It takes courage to talk about these issues, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And I just encourage people to do that, to watch a documentary, via Zoom or whatever, and then talk about, like, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? And how does it affect your life?
Oh, I love that. We should talk about that. Maybe do something where we can watch and hear, and then we can talk.
Oh, yeah. It's so,
again,
visual, just to see something very powerful visually, and then to
have
have the ability to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So,
but it might be good
and then
to do with people. It might be good to do with folks so that they can participate, so we can get a group together, like a large, watch something. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate this.
You are
thank you again for being here.
I'm going to introduce Greg and continue our conversation.
Terrific.
Thanks so much for all the help, and I hope people will donate to GMHC. I hope they're doing so. Bye-bye.
We have much more work to do. Bye-bye.
Good. Hopefully not good, but good that we're still donating and bringing awareness to GMHC. My next guest, Gregg Bruckno, first became acquainted with GMHC back in 1999 at the behest of his doctors, who had encouraged him to join a newly diagnosed support group. Gregg first started working as a volunteer at GMHC in the intake department, and now serves as a health navigator, working with what Krishna and I were just describing, the long-term survivors. Please welcome to the show, Gregg Bruckno. Hey, Greg. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm not hearing you at the moment. Let's see.
Does that work better? Yeah.
It does. It does. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Default settings. Yep. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So talk about how you were first introduced by your doctors to GMHC.
Yeah. So September 1999, September 16th, 1999, I was told I was HIV positive, and my doctor, Dr. Shea at the time, he recommended that I join a support group at GMHC, and that was like my first. I was sort of horrified that this all had happened, and I never thought it would happen to me. I never, my world sort of stopped at the time. So GMHC became like my first sort of refuge, and a place that I could go and get some feel like I was a part of something, because at the time in 1999, I mean, even though things had progressed medically, it was still kind of, I mean, there was a lot of stigma around it, and there still is. So interestingly, it was that year, and I tell this story because it was that year that the next year, I should say, in 2000, that I did AIDS walk, and my mom came up, and she was there, and she had cancer at the time. So she said to me, we were doing the AIDS walk, and she said, "Oh, this looks like a great place for you. Like you can find support here. This is really nice that you have things like this, for people with HIV." And that always stuck with me. My mom didn't. She passed away 3 years later, and but it always resonated with me that when she said that, because in fact, when I did need help, GMHC was there, and that's when I went back in 2015 to try to get back on my feet and get my life back together, because I've been through some things. And, I always say that GMHC saved my life twice. And they continue to, I think my role and my work, the work that I'm doing, it's a purpose for me each day. So I credit the men and women who came before and built that agency and found all the cures or found all the medications and things like that. They were the ones who saved my life, and I feel impassioned today to continue to help people, just like other people helped me back when I needed it. So,
what would you say to somebody who needed help right now? If somebody was watching and got any type of, like your mom, you said cancer or any type, like you found them and they were helpful to you. What would you recommend for somebody?
I work with long-term survivors. There's long-term, so we have the long-term survivor hub at GMHC. Right. My role has shifted over into helping people sign up for health insurance, helping them navigate the health insurance market, which is very complicated, as you might know, and especially with Medicare and in the marketplace, trying to find the right insurance. So people who would come to me, I get phone calls from around the country. People who have heard about the Long-Term Survivor Hub. People will call me from Texas and from Oregon and all these places, and they'll talk to me they'll tell me their stories and how they became long-term survivors and what it was like back then. And I think I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not trained to be that. But often what I've learned is that just by listening to people, and they appreciate that. And that's, I think, goes a long way, just to listen to somebody talk about their story. But as far as we have a lot of services within the agency that I could recommend people for mental health. You had mentioned cancer. Certainly, I'm not a doctor, so I would have to recommend them to a doctor.
No, right. But like you said, GMHC was so helpful. That's how I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, you know what it is. Yeah, I think for what I've learned, and I think it's just listening mostly, and then trying to figure out how to help people. I mean, the biggest issue I see with long-term survivors is the isolation and the loneliness, and a whole generation died around people, and a lot of older adults. I mean, I just turned 50, so I hit that demographic now. That's in that 70%. 70% of the people living with HIV in the United States are 50 and older, and that's, I think, by 2030, that statistic will be like that. And I just hit that demographic. And, this whole COVID thing really brought to light what it's like to be isolated. I never in my life felt so alone than during this. And it really kind of brought to light to me, like, wow, this is what people do every day that have been living with HIV since the 80s or 90s. This is often what they talk about, like sitting home alone and being alone and not feeling that there's anybody there. So, a lot of the programming that GMHC does helps get people socialized. When I was working with the Hub, Long-Term Survivor Hub, we were doing a chat and chew with St. John's Lutheran Church down on St. Christopher's on Christopher Street, and it was a monthly thing, and people loved it. It was like this monthly dinner that people came together. The church sponsored it. They would cook the spaghetti, or they would do something like home meal, and people really enjoyed that. And then COVID happened, and everything sort of stopped. But people really, the one thing I think people need the most is socialization. Not everybody is able to get out and all that, but that's where the buddy program can be something to help with that as a social outlet or whatever. So.
And are you doing things virtually with them at the moment during this time?
Well, yeah. I mean, so the Hub is right now. They're doing. We had developed a program around AIDS survivor syndrome or AIDS survivorship with funding through Gilead, and it's called I'm Still Here, and it was a program initially designed for people who were diagnosed before 1996 and who were 50 and older. Then it moved up to the year 2000, but it was always for people who were 50 and older. And that program has now shifted into the virtual world, and that just started. So that's yes, things are shifting over virtually. Krishna had mentioned about wellness calls. We were doing that. And it's right now in my capacity that I'm working as a health navigator. I talk to people all the time. Not everybody's HIV positive though that I speak with in the health navigator position. Many of them are long-term survivors. Many of them need help with navigating Medicare or whatever. But I speak with a much more diverse population than just HIV positive. So, but with the Hub, the Long-Term Survivor Hub, and the Healthy Aging Program and all that we have going on at GMHC, the goal is to get people to come together in some capacity. So virtually, that's how it is right now. It's not the most ideal, but it's what we have for right now. So,
but I'm sure it helps them. Right?
Yeah, I think, like I said, people like to. I had a client one time who called me one time, and we were talking, and I said, well, I'm gonna. If I call, will you pick up the phone? And he says, I always pick up the phone because nobody calls. And, that sort of stuff broke my heart. Like, it was just like hearing stuff like that was like, wow, people really are lonely and people really do need people. And I think the HIV, Krishna hit the nail on the head when she said stigma. I think stigma in this country is still what keeps people from disclosing their HIV status to public, and then there's homophobia, there's sexism, there's racism, there's all those sort of things that I think play into the whole HIV stigma issue. So, yeah, that's I just the goal. I think the goal is to help people socialize and to get people out there.
I mean, it really is crazy that the stigma is still so prevalent in 2020. It's just. Education, conversation, speaking about these things is what helps to truly break down those barriers.
Yeah, I didn't come out publicly with my HIV status like this in this capacity until it was 2 years ago in 2018. I was never really public about it, and it was kind of a sort of it was emotionally, I was emotionally exhausted the next day when I actually did speak to a reporter about my HIV status, and but
Did
and I think there's a lot of go ahead.
Did something prompt you to do it at that time 2 years ago?
It just felt right. It felt right. It was even when I went into the long-term survivor hub. I remember asking my supervisor at the time. I said, should I disclose that I'm a long-term survivor? And that was like sort of the mindset that I had, that I didn't necessarily have to, and she said, you do what you're comfortable with. But I think over the course of time, as I saw and met people who live their life advocating for people who had HIV, I felt it became more necessary for me to come out publicly and say that I'm HIV positive. I'm a gay man. I'm 50 years old. That's another hard one to say, but
I hear you. I'm 54, so
it's the hardest one to say right now. I'm 50.
54, so I hear you.
Yeah, it's just and in the gay world, at certain ages, you hit a mark, and it becomes this sort of I think I have a lot of internalized ageism and stigma. I have internalized stigma about a lot of things. So
I think a lot of gay men too around age, and being ageism. How do you feel that now that you've done it 2 years ago, that you disclosed your status?
For me it's I guess I feel like maybe when I did it, I really feel like this is a purpose in my life, is to do this work, whatever it is I'm doing to help people, either living with HIV or preventing getting HIV. I feel like I finally in my life found my purpose of what I'm meant to do or should be doing in my life. I mean, I had many different jobs. Retail, publishing, marketing, everything. If you look at my resume, you're like, wow, you did a lot. But it's really the work that I'm doing now that I love the most. And I love this age. I love GMHC. I really, like I said it before. They saved my life. I truly believe they saved my life now twice.
Talk about prevention. I mean, how do you help spread the prevention message through GMHC?
Well, prevention is, I think, in my mind, prevention. What you have the prophylactics, you have condoms. You just have, I think, the disclosure. I think being able to disclose your HIV status is important. So I think me being forthright about my status might empower somebody else to be forthright about their status. I think prevention these days is it's about education. So if I'm out there educating people about HIV, that if I'm undetectable, I can't transmit it. If I take my meds, I can live a long life. HIV is not a death sentence. It is not AIDS. I mean, I could get AIDS if I don't take my meds. There's a whole whole misnomer of that I have AIDS.
Right.
I recently, I'll give you an example, and this is my niece who just turned 18 and is in college. I was talking to her, and I was saying she was going off to college, and I said, make sure you practice safe sex. And of course, I get the ew, like ew, and I said no. I said, you could get STIs and you get HIV. She goes, I won't get AIDS. And I said, well, it's not the same thing. I said, I have HIV. She goes, you have AIDS? And she did that face. And I said, excuse me? It was like one of those moments. It was like, and she didn't mean anything mean by it. But I think even at that age, even though they probably never learned a thing about HIV in schooling, people know what it is. It's automatically tagged to gay men or drug users, whatever. There's that instant identification, and And I had to educate her a little bit. So I think that's part of prevention, is educating. And part of educating is being open about it. I can't educate people about things if I don't tell people about my experience. And I think that becomes part of the overall issue sometimes, is that people aren't open about it. I always say, like, if I had cancer, I would not whisper it. Like, sometimes when I say I have HIV, I whisper it. Like, I have HIV, I'm HIV positive, are you? But if I had cancer, or if I was in remission of cancer, I wouldn't whisper it. I wouldn't do any of that. So I often say to myself, like, why am I whispering about my HIV status? There's nothing wrong with me. I take a pill every day, and it keeps me alive. It's an expensive pill. Thank God for insurance, but thank God for ADAP, I should say. But it keeps me alive, and it's kept me alive now for a little over 21 years, which is remarkable, because I think back then I never thought that I would probably get to this point in my life. I never looked this far. Even though the meds were there, I still felt like I would be, something would happen to me or whatever, that people wouldn't love me.
Because of the diagnosis?
Because of the diagnosis, yeah. I mean, it was like, I just remember the day that happened, and it was like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I remember my doctor was on 14th and 8th, and I remember walking down 8th Avenue, the strip, and I was stunned, and I was just like, oh my God, my world was ending. And things were difficult at that time. I had some opportunistic infection that I had to constantly go to St. Vincent's ICU for, but I got through it. And the boyfriend broke up with me in the ICU one night, and I went through that. And there was a lot that went on in the beginning, and but I wound up marrying.
Definitely makes you stronger.
It did. It did. I've been.
Has given you a purpose now?
It has. It's led me back to, my higher power, as I will call it, has led me back to where I think I always belonged. And it's given me the strength to be the person that I think I'm meant to be. Whatever that is, I don't know. I mean, I still don't know what my destiny is, but it's made me think about going back to get my master's in public health. I'm on the planning council committee, HIV, New York City's HIV planning council, one of the planning committees for integration of care. So I just was appointed to that. So there's a lot going on, like that. Now my life is HIV. It revolves around it, which I love. I mean, I really love doing what I'm doing.
And you're helping a lot of people. A lot of people in our age group.
That's right, in our bracket. Yeah.
In our bracket. Exactly.
When I look at check boxes, and I'm in that weird bracket now. It's like 45 to
55.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. Greg, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being honest and sharing, because I do think, just like you said with your niece, I mean, it is just people need to understand, have a conversation, just talk to somebody, no matter what it is, a Black person, somebody gay. And you were saying about whispering. I mean, we used to whisper, I'm gay, you were out somewhere telling someone, I'd be afraid to tell someone,
Yeah. I think as our age bracket, the 70s, the late 60s, mid 60s, 70s children, we whispered everything because we were afraid. That's how we were raised.
I would run, park my car at the gay bar in New Jersey and run from the parking lot into the bar, afraid to, being seen. Such a different time. Well, stay well, stay healthy, and thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today. I really want to thank my guests, Tyler Helms, Krishna Stone, and Gregg Bruckno. If you feel so inclined to donate to GMHC today, please please do so. It would mean the world to me. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. Don't forget, you can turn on the notification bell and get an update on all the upcoming shows. Thanks so much. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.